We have plenty of conversations that have prospects say like, this really helped move my decision or whatever it may be. So even though they know that there might be some bias behind it, they still feel like they are getting that peer response. And so the ability to hear it from a peer outweighs the idea that they might be getting some sort of incentive to give them that information. So we're plugged into the CRMs and the PMSs. Like if I talk to you and my information is being captured by the community's PMS, CRM, everything. So you're in line for the reward should I move in. And then if I, as the prospect, have more questions and I wanted to get either a second opinion or I forgot where your chat was or whatever the question may be, or I go on the website and I'm like, oh, they look interesting, I'm going to send them a message. Rentgrata will allow it, but the resident reward portion would be split if I, as the prospect, moved in.
Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, today we had Zach on, one of the founders from Rentgrata, which
Zach Sloan, very easy to pronounce.
Yeah. But what is his new title? Pop quiz?
Chief Sales Influencer.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because Rentgrata.
I immediately turned that into CSI. It's easier to say.
I should have asked him, like, I wonder, I feel like at conferences 5 years ago, we were hearing the word influencer a lot. You remember all the sessions around like.
Yeah, content, really.
Yeah, but I haven't noticed that at conferences more recently. So I regret not asking him, like, do you think influencers or in this industry was more of a fad with the social media in particular, or does it still connect with people when they say influencer?
Yeah, that would have been a great question. We'll never know.
Well, what about you? What do you think?
About the influencer title?
Yeah, meaning like, you think it would still connect to this industry or not? And then do you have any?
I think so. I think the fad was probably more specific, like content influencers, like, are they, well, is it that time, I guess, for this industry? And it seemed to kind of come and go pretty quickly. And I think that's just because it's tough to scale and it's expensive and, there's no guarantees on ROI. I mean, I won't go on and on, but there's some obvious things that I think we're probably going to make that a tough one. But the term itself, I think, is still got, some of that attraction or sizzle, where it's like, that just sounds a little bit cooler, more sophisticated.
Yeah.
So I think influencer still has some longevity, like when it comes to titles and the way you kind of position a business.
What about, do you have any thoughts or predictions on AI influencers? So in the world to come, with software like Midjourney and what Adobe's releasing, you can basically have a fake avatar, that you can engage with. And that's obviously one of the challenges as they're speaking to with the Actors Guild and even the writer's strike. It's like how AI could change, media moving forward. So what's your first take on?
I don't think that's a thing in this industry. I think you have to be kind of listening and paying attention, to the trades outside of the industry to really be aware or thinking about that. But I definitely think that's something that, will eventually make its way to multifamily and, will be a good topic for the next couple of years, like getting in front of that. Like, how's that going to change, or will it change, multifamily marketing?
Yeah, it's what I find interesting about the thought experiment is we know marketers will often develop like custom, here's what the dinner plate would look like, or here's the hors d'oeuvres that should be served at this property because of the brand. And so I can imagine not too far from now, a marketer coming in and saying, hey, here's the AI avatar that, totally envelops your brand for this building. Now, to your point, would they actually use it? Probably not. I mean, not in the near term, because it's like they don't really take, here's the plants or the garden for this, whatever. They don't really take that forward at the moment. It's more of like a nice way to show that you understand the property more than it is like something that they're going to put on display to the future residents.
Yeah, which gets me into, we were just upstairs and looking at some topics that we were going to submit for OpTech. And you had mentioned like the strike zone for adoption, like in multifamily. Like, what does that look like? When's too soon, when's too late, and what's the criteria that shapes that? And this is a great example, kind of this concept of the AI avatar for a property. Like, and I'm sure we both know there's plenty of owners operators that all it would take is one example, as you like to point to early on with ChatGPT, where it told somebody to kill themselves or something.
Mm.
That's the extreme, but I'm just saying I think there will be a lot of that where you have just one or two examples of it going off the rails and it gets shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll be interesting to see, if and when there becomes a big middle with adoption, or if like the early adopter stage is really protracted
Mm-hmm.
in this industry, because of how damaging, it can be with when AI goes off the rails, especially if you're saying an avatar that represents the brand.
Yeah, this is a more risk-averse industry. However, as we were also saying, people are willing in this industry to have like one pet property that like gets all their tests. But because it's one property, it's hard for them to then say, "Oh yeah, that test made a real difference." That's why it's succeeding, or why the needle did move or didn't move. There's always, as we were talking about for OpTech emissions, there's always all this commentary, or frankly excuses about why something did or didn't work in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing that back to Rentgrata, he mentions in the episode that that you asked him like, what is one of the biggest challenges, and he said people just worried about like, well, what if the resident that's responding to the prospect goes off the rails or hates me? And so that's the number one thing he has to overcome, and that's with a human to human, let alone a machine that you have no relationship with.
Right.
And so now he did have good numbers at this point to back up why conversion rates have increased when you have a resident referral versus just having a typical, as I'm just saying, a more generic chatbot experience. So I could see the same thing here, where people are apprehensive about the AI, then they may test it out, but until you get those mass numbers like what Zach has, it's hard to say emphatically like, yep, that AI was worth the headache and the risk.
100%. You have to have the scale to appropriately test it. So then the operator can just kind of block out the noise and say, it's pretty clear this number of conversion rates versus the damage that was done by these two residents that badmouth the property. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We're still going to adopt Rentgrata or whatever new technology. But I think unfortunately that's not what is realistic for most property management companies. Is they don't test things at scale. They're afraid to test things at scale.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what happens. And so then, are they missing opportunities or too quickly celebrating like wins because they only put it on their favorite test property? And yeah, is that really a good way to build a business? So pros and cons.
And frankly, it's really hard to do a fair test in this industry. One of the topics for OpTech that they're asking for is how do you make your tech stack efficient? And yet in this industry, if you're a third-party manager, it's like a losing battle. It's like near impossible to actually make an efficient tech. You're just, it's a Frankenstack across the board. So maybe owner operators, but owner operators don't tend to be the ones that are like early adopters. Owner operators tend to say like, all right, I'll wait. They're way more price conscious, and they'll just like see what works. So that's why it's so challenging for new technology to come in. And get a fair shake. But anything else from the conversation with Zach that you want to highlight before we get into it?
I thought it was great. I appreciated some of those anecdotes. We asked him definitely some tough questions, and he had very eloquent answers. And I think Rentgrata. Wow. Apologies, Zach. I think their journey's been a fun one to watch. I'll say from afar, but now that we've got to know Zach, I'm looking forward to building that relationship. But I think they've done a great job in relatively short amount of time. I mean, they founded in 2016, and I think they're a very well known name and reputable name now in the industry. And so with that comes, I'll say, some power that they're wielding, and we'll see where it goes, because it does sound like they're going to have some competition coming their way maybe in the near future. But I love where they're positioned, and I think they have a great upside.
Well, this is a real fun conversation with Zach. If you, I encourage you to stay tuned towards the end of the episode, both Zach and us to share experiences on some of our biggest faux pas when building our companies. So if you want to have some good ammunition to, I don't know, throw at us the next time you see us at a conference, then stay tuned to the last like 20% of this episode.
That'd be called audio bait.
Is it audio bait? You could skip to the last part of the episode.
Yeah.
then your impression won't count. All right. Well, hope you guys enjoy. Okay, we're here with Zach Sloan. Zach, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. As you may have just heard, I'm Zach Sloan, one of the co-founders of Rentgrata and self-dubbed chief sales influencer of the company. So I help run our sales efforts along with many other things that a co-founder helps do from day to day.
When did you give yourself that promotion? How long you been in the role?
When we formed the company, I was the chief financial officer because I was a CPA in my previous life. So that was just a natural fit. And then just threw around a lot of different names of like titles out there, and nothing really seemed to fit. And for anyone that knows me or who I am in the industry, I just don't think that I was going to fit into any one title that a lot of people have. So I wanted chief because I'm still executive level at Rentgrata, but thought sales. And since a lot of what Rentgrata does and a lot of influencers out there today, you're really just like influencing when you're making sales. You're not technically becoming a salesperson. And what a lot of what we do at Rentgrata has to do with influencing. So there you have it. That's how the name came about.
All right. Well, give us the elevator pitch. I think many of the folks listening will know Rentgrata, but for those that don't, give us your elevator pitch.
Yeah, so Rentgrata has changed a little bit over time, and really how we describe it now is it's a lead nurture platform, but the people doing the nurturing of those leads are your actual residents that live at the community that want to help answer questions from the prospects that are interested in living there. And then if a prospect moves in after chatting with one of these residents, the resident and the prospect would make some sort of reward for leveraging the platform. And by connecting these two parties, you're really able to answer questions that are unanswerable right now. So a common question that you might see through your AI chatbot or wherever it may be is, what's the pet policy, right? It's very, there's no gray area on that. It's pretty black and white in the answer you get. But how does your pet like living here is a question that pretty much every potential resident is asking, because their pet is probably one of the most important things to them in the world. And the most qualified people to answer that question are those residents. And that's why our conversion rates are so high, is because people just want to talk to other people that they feel that they have commonalities with.
If you were to ask my pets, they would say they don't like living at my house, but they would wish to live at Starbucks because they get the puppuccino. So
hey, you can't have it all, but they do get a roof over the head, right? They probably have a pretty nice bed. I mean, puppuccinos are good, but I think you probably provide them a pretty good experience.
Well, thanks for the vote of confidence. All right. So how has it changed over time? You mentioned you weren't from the industry. So where did you guys start in 2016? What problem were you trying to solve versus today? As you say, you basically are providing a conduit for these influencers that can help people decide that it's the place they want to live.
Yeah, no. So back 2016, CPA at Ernst & Young, just working remotely at the time a little bit. So don't tell my coworkers that were in New York at the time, but I was on the balcony of the community I lived at, and someone in my network moved in to my community. I missed the referral reward and kind of got upset. Similar story happened very shortly after. So went to one of my friends at Ernst & Young, and actually was a friend outside of work as well, Sam, who is one of the other co-founders of Rentgrata. And we just started tossing around the idea of like, why don't we know where people live that are in our social network? And if we want to move into their community, why don't we have a better way of kind of communicating with them? So that's when Sam roped in one of his college buddies who lived in California at the time and was one of three of us to have actual real estate experience. And what Ben had helped us solve is that where he was working, they saw a 42% conversion rate of resident referrals and only a 4% conversion rate from their ILSs. And it was like, well, if we can get anywhere between those two and bridge that gap, then that would be a serious, game changer for the communities. So when we started, we were just a Chicago-based ILS with this chat with a resident feature. And at least I'll speak on my behalf. It was very naive to think our value prop is better than apartments.com. It's better than Zillow. So we're just going to roll this out, and then everyone's going to start using it in Chicago, and then it's just going to blow up. So I went to train stations, went to outdoor events, everything. We set up booths at any event in Chicago. We had a partnership with RX Bar at the time. They gave us literally pallet full of RX bars for free. They had a semi-truck backup pallet up to the condo we all lived at together. Nice. Funny story in that one. They were like, "Where's your loading dock?" We were like, "This is a condo where 5 people are at. I don't know where you thought we were going to have a loading dock." But really, yeah, it was just an ILS, and we had kind of an advisor let us know, like, you're creating a marketplace with too many sides. You need to eliminate a side of the marketplace. So we partnered with our management company partners and provided a website widget to help their website traffic convert at a more high rate. And then recently, in the past 6 months, we kind of took it a step further and created more of an outbound email campaign for all of the property's leads to have the opportunity to see that they could chat with a resident. So instead of just converting website traffic now, we have a proactive email campaign that helps convert every lead that comes into the property's CRM. So what that's done is that's helped increase the number of conversations and prospects that we're touching by around 3 to 4 times what the website widget was doing. So, for anyone out there that's listening on the startup side or just thinking about a company, like, it's taken us quite a few years to really understand the product market fit and how we can get the value prop out there best in front of the prospects. And with this newest release, it's called Neighbor Nurture. It's been something that we're happy to help champion and scream from the rooftops about.
I'm going to jump what usually comes later, at least for me, but I want to ask, so if you were a CPA at Ernst & Young and today, and then you came in and looked at Rentgrata, what would Zach of Ernst & Young thought of where you guys sit today?
I don't know that Zach of Ernst & Young would recognize this Zach. I will tell you that. Sam from our team can speak most closely to that. So I think he would first be in shock of this person being able to communicate so freely with others that he didn't know, and understand a product in an industry that he just knew how to lease an apartment because he signed on the lease form and connected his bank account. And I think, honestly, at the time, that Zach to this one would not believe that we're here. Taking you back to 2016, like, I wasn't very entrepreneurial. Like, I picked accounting. I wanted a safe 20-year career path to become a partner. I thought that was going to be where I was at for a long time. And so I think when we were making the decision to start the company, it was something where it was like, I really wasn't ready at the time. And it took me time, even after the decision was made, to become an entrepreneur and to leave something I studied in undergrad. I went to grad school for, got my CPA. I literally invested so much time, effort, money, and my family supporting all those types of things. So I think the craziest thing would be like, hey, you have people that depend on you. Like, you have actual employees, you have customers, you are helping to create a change in the industry and help people find better places to live. So I think that he would be in shock about too many things to articulate. So I don't know that you get a straight answer out of him.
What if he looked at your books? Would he be like, shoot, this is a disaster? Or would he be like, holy cow, look at this. I'm going to give you the stamp of approval. I'm wondering because, like, I feel like
Zach did tell us before we got on this podcast that nothing was off limits.
Yeah, that's true.
So clearly David is trying to take advantage of
I'm asking because we know a lot of customers that hire consultants, and I feel like consultants, it's the whole, like, if you haven't done it, like, what value is your advice? And I'm super curious, like, coming from such a big firm, if you like, there's like the by the book way to do it versus there's the real world way to do it. So I just thought it'd be fun to ask you.
Well, I'd say what he would probably be most happy about was when we actually started to take in real money from, like, accredited investors and some VC funds out there that this Zach stopped doing the books for Rentgrata and stopped doing the tax returns and the R&D credits and all those fun things. And we actually got real tax people on the account and real accountants, because I mean, when I was at Ernst & Young, I don't know how much you all listening know about Big Four accounting, but like you literally just do what you do very well. Like you don't learn a wide variety of things. You're taught to do, I was doing partnership returns and K1s for hedge funds and private equity deals. So starting a C Corp that's in Delaware, that's doing, you know, R&D credits and all those things, it was really just kind of, hey, I think I know what I'm doing because I understand how to read tax law and everything. But once we needed to actually track things and account for them the right way, then I was rotated off. And I think that's maybe where chief sales influencer came into play. So I think you'd be happy to know that I'm done with that life. And I've actually become officially an inactive CPA, speaking of, so I didn't renew it because I was like, even if Rentgrata ends up not working out well or whatever the outcome is, I will never be an accountant again, ever. So this is my newfound industry.
Well, Reid, throw Zach a bone here. If Reid, the marketing consultant, stepped into Digible to help out, what would he think?
You got too many things going on. Pretty quickly narrow that focus. You know, I say it all the time, but I feel like a hypocrite. Narrow focus, broad results. But I think they'd also be energized by all the different opportunities. So, you know, you can't have it both ways, I guess. But that would be the first reaction.
Yeah. Well, I think of the stories they used to tell me when you lived with the chef and the chef would come home and cook, like an experiment. Yeah. It's almost like the opposite for us. It's not like we do marketing on Digible like extensively or haven't in the past. I know we're getting into that. So that's why I think about it, because it's almost like, well, we don't even touch our own stuff.
Yeah, I'd probably be critical about that part, but we're trying to change that, as you know.
Haven't needed to. But
yeah.
Anyways, go ahead.
Well, I'm curious, is backing up a little bit when David asked you about what problem you're trying to solve, which you already, you know, clearly answered, but would you say the problem has gotten bigger, smaller, or stayed kind of the same since 2016 when you guys started? And part two of that is just clue us in on competitors, or if you feel like you have any. But typically when you start to see some momentum, especially in that startup stage, others take notice. So I'm just curious, bigger problem, smaller, same, and what does the competitive landscape look like for Rentgrata?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because in 2016, 2017, you really couldn't have imagined COVID just changing the technology landscape. And so I think in 2019, we started to change our business model from just being the ILS to the website widget. And so we were getting traction outside of Chicago. Olympus property company in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they're headquartered there. They have properties across the United States, but they were one of the first clients to give us a shot at like what Rentgrata could do outside of the Chicago market. And so we were getting a little bit more exposure, and then COVID hit, and we had, you know, a number of clients outside of Chicago, but really like the idea of bringing it up was it was just getting traction. We were just starting to understand how we could really help clients. And then that happened. I think people started to shore up. Like the first thing you needed to do, well, outside of like safety things and all that, was virtual touring, all those different types of things. So you needed to be able to help people understand what your units look like that they could safely tour if they didn't want to physically come in. And so where Rentgrata comes in is we weren't, and still technically on how you want to label us, like you could say, I can lease an apartment without Rentgrata. So necessity, maybe not, right? Especially during COVID time. But as things have progressed, I think people have started to learn that you need to be more tech forward. You need to help meet your renter where they are. And the idea is like, yes, your community could post TikToks because people are on TikTok, but like, is that solving the problem? Or you're just kind of like trying to do it because you think that that's going to get you the outcome that you need. And the whole idea behind like how prospective renters and how, you know, we spoke about it earlier, Reid, like you have some children that are a little bit younger, and like the way that they're communicating isn't the way that someone that's making marketing decisions communicated, and they don't communicate today. And so the concept is that a lot of people that are in that range of 15 to 25 to 30 years old, they're so accustomed to communicating on their phone and to communicating with people that they might not necessarily even know, but they have this level of trust in them. So when you get in an Uber, right, you're getting in a random person's car to drop you off at your home, possibly late at night when you're alone, and you might be intoxicated one night. And anybody listening, I bet you the likelihood of all those things happening has probably been pretty high. Like you might have got driven home by an Uber when you were drunk one night. And
I won't give you my percentage of it.
Well, I hope it's high. So you're not driving, but yeah. So the idea is like and then with an Airbnb, like you're staying in someone's physical place, and so we've changed the way that we do a lot of different things, and so the way that we're communicating and the way that we're viewing things and the way we're consuming information and content has changed so drastically. But yet, in the apartment space, we think that maybe changing the way our image looks on an ILS is going to like meet the renter where they are. And in reality, like there's so much more where if a community is doing short-term leasing or if they have a really cool co-working space, that's what you need to get out there. People don't understand that the name of your community means that you have co-working or it means that you have short-term rentals. And spending money on an ILS to get a premium package isn't going to help you spread that word. So I think roundabout way, Reid, I'll get there, is like we have become more needed in a space where content is consumed digitally and it is in a more real-time basis. And kind of, I don't know if y'all were going to ask like a bold prediction, but one of the things that I'm kind of starting to figure out how I'm going to get the content out there. But the idea is that is AI going to be somewhat commoditized and become a commodity where if multiple communities are running a very similar AI, you're getting the same script from the same bot with the same information and it's prepackaged and it's cold. And then all of a sudden, yes, you're becoming automated and yes, you're responding to leads quicker than ever and more of them than ever. But you might be alienating the person because they can't even differentiate your community from another one that's using a very similar cadence. So I think that as we become more dependent on technology, the human personalization element will help Rentgrata become more of a focal point in that hyper local knowledge. And then part B of your question is, we would have thought there would be more serious competitors, I suppose is the way of putting it at this point, with the proof of concept and the clientele that we have and kind of the people that will speak and be proud to talk about their experience with Rentgrata. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not complaining about having this opportunity to continue to build our market share, but depending on how you look at Rentgrata, if it's a resident engagement platform, yes, we have competitors. If it's a prospect engagement platform, yes, we also have competitors. But bridging the gap between the resident experience becoming a focal point of your marketing, both helping resident retention and helping your conversion rates on the marketing side, no one is really capturing that market and mastering it. And so in the meantime, we have plenty of partnerships that we're continuing to build out. And we want to be that main one where we have our own resident API and we want to partner with these other prop tech companies out there to get that resident experience in different spots in the funnel. But no real competitors to speak of. And if there is someone listening that is a real competitor, I don't mean to offend you. I just don't know about your technology.
Well, that was great perspective and context. I appreciate the thoroughness, and I'm going to give you a 10 out of 10 on your CSI score.
Thank you.
Best chief sales influencer, if anybody missed that. There's all sorts of questions swirling around in my head. I'm sure David's too. Part of that is how the sausage is made. So I'll get to that in a second. But given that delta you mentioned at the beginning of 4 to like 40% between an ILS and a resident referral, as far as conversion rates, what possibly could be the objections that you guys face? Like if I see that and you guys are now into it several years, yeah, I mean, I'd just be saying, where do I sign? So what are you guys hearing as far as objections with those kinds of conversion rates?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one I kind of lose a little bit of sleep over because it's hard to understand at times. But like really, the biggest objection we get, hands down, still, and this is from the start, is just like, you haven't seen my residents. Like, very common thing we get, like, hey, I have residents that are angry. I've seen my Google reviews. Like, I understand that maybe there are 95 of 100 happy residents, but those five, like, those are the ones that are going to love this platform to use it to bash me. And I think that there's so much to unpack there, right? Where anytime you have the odds, and I'm just using a shot in the dark there with that 5 and 95 out of 100, but anytime that you have a 95% chance of success on helping yourself and you're worried about that 5% chance, which we have ways of mitigating that 5%, then we really need to evaluate like the bigger problem at hand. And those five people, and 5% in this instance, they're already going to Google. They're already getting their negative experiences out there publicly, putting you kind of on blast, putting a 1-star saying never move here. What if you could use those other 95% of the people to counteract the negative Google reviews and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yes, you might have read that bad review, but chat with someone else. Ask them about their experience because that problem was fixed, or that was never a problem. Or yes, they got towed, but maybe they shouldn't have been in the no parking area. So like there are kind of this misconception in a way. And again, I didn't come from on site and I didn't work in their job. So I'm not trying to say that I understand the problem better, but I think we just need to set aside the idea that residents are angry and residents are trying to look at ways to discourage people from signing a lease at the community, and think about offering a financial amenity to someone to actually use the referral program that you market on paper to say, hey, sign a lease, get someone to sign a lease and we'll give you $500. Well, what if for $50 a lease, you could pay 10 resident referrals? And that's what we're seeing, right? We don't encourage offering a big $500 reward. I say offer $50 per reward and get this out in front of all of your prospects. And so I think that's like, when it comes down to it, whether it's a verbal or a nonverbal way of kind of like declining or not moving forward, it's being a little bit hesitant of the squeaky wheel becoming the face of the reputation management. And I think like and I think this is the biggest thing, getting back to an earlier question about like what CPA Ernst & Young Zach would ask this Zach or talk about. But I think that Zach, when we started the company, had thought, oh, if I just get this REIT, then that REIT will be interested. Or I even had someone at one of the REITs say, if you get this REIT and this company with a good reputation to sign up, we're all in. And I emailed this person, I go, we got both. And they're like, congratulations. And I was like, oh, okay, so we're not moving forward. So I think that, it's one of those things where you could try and build up that belief in a product, and you can have case studies and everything, but at a certain point you just have to get people over that hump that residents aren't going to be spiteful and they do want to help you and make some side hustle money.
So do you mind if I just squeeze in, I'm not going to go too in the weeds, but it may take you there on how the sausage is made, but how do you secure the residents / vet, and then how are they introduced to the prospect? And somewhere in that, explains or helps me understand the 95 to 5 equation. So is that part of what you would tell an owner is this is randomized? We have 30 potential residents that could respond to that chat. And if you just do the percentages, probably 33 out of 35 are going to be positive. So yeah, talk to us about the customer journey. How do you secure them? How do you vet them? And then how are they introduced to the prospect?
Yeah, no, I mean, when you multiply fractions by fractions, it's even better for the likelihood that you're not going to get one of those angry residents. But high level, how it works is when we integrate with a community to launch, we look through to the resident list and we actually have the ability to look at who's like on non-renewal, eviction, all those different types of things. And through the integration and through kind of our terms of use and everything, those residents might not even get an invite to join the platform. And then after the rest of the resident base gets the invite to join Rentgrata, retroactively, a community could go in and look at their resident list. And through our terms of use, there are opportunities to potentially remove a resident if there are a whole host of reasons, but also kind of there's that catch-all, whatever we deem. And then as conversations are occurring, we do have sentiment analysis that's tracking all the conversations to understand what prospects and residents are talking about. And then we're able to see that, catch any conversations and flag them if there are any kind of some bad actors out there. But to your point, whether it is if there are 15 or 20 residents that sign up at a community to be ambassadors, and let's just say 2 of those 20, so 10% of those 20 signed up and they aren't your best residents, the likelihood of them getting a question and then the likelihood of them receiving a question and wanting to turn down the opportunity to make a potential referral reward, knowing that despite even if they said, don't move here, prospect might just go to another resident and ask them about their experience, and then we would remove that resident. So the idea that a prospect is potentially going to be tainted by that resident, again, compare that to what's happening on Google, where that one resident is going out there and they're getting in front of how many eyeballs are able to see that review. And if you're able to just understand that, like, it's just a stark difference. And at times it seems like it's a easier discussion with some clients to help get them over that hurdle. But in reality, I think there's just some difficulty of understanding that the resident experience is good. Like, people renew and they might complain and renew. Like, I put in service tickets. I'm going to renew. Like, I love where I live, but in reality, they might be like, yeah, I don't know if this person is happy or not. And that's a whole nother question about surveys and all that, those different types of things. But I think even kind of going further down that rabbit hole of like the residents you might have questions about are probably pretty happy. And even the residents that are squeaky wheels have actually referred people on Rentgrata, which is like a social experiment on another day. We could talk about that one.
Totally. As you were talking through it, it made me think about categories of residents. Like, you see on Amazon, the simple separation of like, this is a verified purchase or person that has purchased this product.
Mm-hmm.
But just if I'm 3 months into living at that property versus I've been there for 4 years, how much stock you put at the newbie versus, the more tenured resident. But there's all sorts of fun things to think about where you guys could take this. And I'm sure you got a pipeline a mile long. I'm going to let David squeeze in his stuff. I have a lot more questions about how it all works. But super fascinating. Glad you guys are obviously out in front of it.
Yeah, I was under the misunderstanding. I thought you guys like went to a property and got like 3, like almost like not hold an audition, but I thought you guys like handpicked like 3 or 4 residents and they had to be the ones to respond. And so one of my concerns for, a while when I thought about your guys' platform was that, well, what if they're not readily available? Like, what's the average like time to response? And, what's that user experience like? It sounds like, in fact, this would be great if you have any sort of like just directional numbers, Zach. On average, let's say you have 200 units at the property. How many people would typically end up being on your platform and able to respond to somebody?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll provide a little bit of color behind it too, where when we first launched, we would kind of go to communities because it was not scalable, but it was so important at the time to get residents to sign up. And what we noticed though was we had an app, and we've recently got rid of the app completely. And we've gone the message of just text message based. So it's a private number. We are communicating similar to like your Uber or Grubhub or Airbnb. You're never giving your real information, but it is just a simple SMS. So average response time is 14 minutes. That includes nights, weekends, holidays. I was just talking with a client earlier that we showed it was like 75 to 80% of their messages came from 4 p.m. to 9 a.m. So a lot of people are searching for, questions and answers after hours. And the idea behind Rentgrata is you're not just on a website communicating like you are with a chatbot, right? This communication can take place over hours or days with the resident. So your community is now top of mind with that prospect for forever long, the two of them want to communicate. And with getting rid of the app and really, kind of trying to find that right medium of making it easy to sign up, but also we want residents to sign up that are going to respond and going to be that quality resident. So we have created some friction in there and have some community guidelines and things to hold them a little bit accountable for being a Rentgrata ambassador. But typically we see between like 4 to 6% of a community sign up. And on that, like there are some factors where we've had a lease up where we get in there early and all the prospects will use Rentgrata and then they'll become residents. And so we've had some communities that will get as high as 40%, 50% of the residents will sign up. And in reality, that's way too many. But we're not going to cap it. But at the same time, those are few and far between on just like that much engagement. But dissimilar to some resident engagement platforms that are like, 80, 90%, whatever they may be, we want this to be quality. So when a lead is connected with one of those residents, they are going to field that question and they are going to be responsive and they are going to put the best foot forward for the community.
Yeah, well, that's still great to get, like, let's say 8 people out of 200 units, and it gives you enough coverage and 14-minute response time for a real human, meaning that seems like they'd be unbiased or mostly unbiased, right? Like, sure, $50 referral fee, but I don't think that I doubt they'd be gaming the system much. So that's really helpful. Does the same thing happen? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just the interesting thing, you're right. So eight is like our benchmark on low end, but the interesting thing about like the psychology behind the conversations is prospects will say like, seriously, David, tell me, is this the resident experience? Or like, honestly, what's your feedback? And they use these little buzzwords that you're like, you're just like, all right, maybe the conversation was going to have that same response anyway, but the prospect feels like they have less concern because they got that. And, we have plenty of conversations that have prospects say like, this really helped me with my decision or whatever it may be. So even though they know that there might be some bias behind it, they still feel like they are getting that peer response. And so the ability to hear it from a peer outweighs the idea that they might be getting some sort of incentive to give them that information. And so I think that's an important one to kind of understand, like how we differentiate. This isn't just a money grab. We want you to feel like this is the next place for you to call home.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what about the neighbor nurture? You said that was newer, where you guys are now handling all leads that come in. Is that still handled similarly, where it's going out to these 8 or 8+ residents and they're responding?
Yeah, so let's just say the community has 8 residents signed up. Any lead that comes into the system, we at Rentgrata automatically kind of generate an email to that lead, and it would say, hey, I'm Reid. I live at Q21 Apartments. If you have any questions, ask me. They use an app called Rentgrata, and it's free to ask me anything you want. And if you move in, then great. And the click-through rate and everything that we've seen on that, it varies by market, but it's around 8 to 9%. So very effective and impactful, especially when you compare it to what website widgets typically see. And with that, we automatically rotate through the resident list. And we haven't, to be honest, we haven't heard the complaint that there's too many conversations. In reality, we were previously hearing people want more conversations. They want more opportunity at money because our conversion rates are sitting anywhere between 25, 30% of prospects that chat end up moving in. So most of the time when a resident is getting a conversation, it's not like they've gone 10 conversations in a row with no success. They're like, hey, I just made $50 off of answering 3 questions for someone. Where do I get more of these? And so we're trying to just serve them up a little bit easier with this platform.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Well, I've got one other thing, and then I'll pass back to Reid here. But have you guys, used this as your own dog food, if you will? Like, have you guys ever put something like this on the Rentgrata site where they can ping Rentgrata clients and blah, blah, blah?
We love that. And the amount of times that everyone gives us that idea and like where we want to go into other markets. And there's a lot of opportunity out there. And it is funny because when a client asks us for a reference, I'm like, well, wouldn't your renters want a reference too? Like, isn't that the whole idea behind this thing? But the way our technology is set up and our engineers, BD side has made this request, but the way our technology is set up is it's just the only way to do it would be to basically create a fake listing for, Rentgrata references, and then have these references for us sign up as residents. Like, we would totally make it a completely different experience to the point where, I mean, it would be great, but it would really dilute the whole idea behind it because it wouldn't be exactly how we want it to be. But yes, like, I think not answering your question completely because I wish we had that technology, but the idea behind getting references for a business is exactly what we're trying to do. It's just we can't do that for ourselves because of the way the technology is built. And I'm kind of crying on the inside from that, but it is what it is.
Dude, there's 100 things like that we've had the same situation where we're like, man, I wish we could do, like, it just is so much effort. I will, like, my out for you guys would be like you said, the tech effort, and you probably don't need to based on your growth. And then in addition, like, it's not like typically in this industry, is your core contact the marketer or the operator? Who's your core contact?
Mostly marketer.
Yeah, so you get one marketer over 50 buildings. And if you were onboarding 50 buildings a month, that's a lot of buildings. And yet that's like one contact. And so my point is, like, it's a big month if you get like 3 inbound or 4 inbound leads of new management companies. And so it's not like you don't have the same velocity that an apartment is turning over where you have this many leads that need handling. Like, our team's average email response time is like 3 hours right now. And, so it's not like we have trouble handling inbound emails, and you guys are probably in the same position. So it's different for apartments that have 60% of calls go unanswered, and usually average response time is like 3 days, and blah blah blah. So that's my argument for you guys not to waste the time.
It is interesting though, because sometimes clients, especially with that neighbor nurture technology, we want them to feel it. And even if, like, Reid, to your question earlier about like the biggest pushback, I'm like, go on there, like, message a resident. And I'll give Stacy Steeman from Pasco a shout out here because she did it. She went out and messaged a resident at a community that they were taking over. And she was just like, I want to move here. Like, I'm not in the apartment. Like, I don't want to move. Like, I don't really need to move. But that resident went above and beyond. And then on another call, this guy was looking distracted because he was, busy. And then he held up his phone. And he was like, is this a real person? Like, they already responded to me. Like, I don't believe it. And so sometimes you just want to challenge people, like, use the technology, understand what it's like, get your hands on it. So to your point, David, like, I do think that there would be value in them going through almost the process of, who do I want to select to ask them? Do I want to select someone that's, on Yardi and uses Knock and ask them a question? And I could ask, so like, we get plenty of those questions, but yes, in a perfect world, we would have built Rentgrata a little bit more agnostically.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, super quick question on the experience. So you mentioned that a lot of your residents just answer 3 or 4 questions, they get $50, then they're looking for the next opportunity. In that scenario though, if I come back a few days later, which is common, right? It often isn't, one exchange and then they make a decision. Are they leaving their email or phone number, or does the app allow for that, where it's like, hey, I talked to Zach at this property, he was super informative, but I had a few more questions and that's who I want to talk to? Or do they just get thrown back into the queue and they could end up talking to any of the other resident?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So it could be kind of handled either way. So we're plugged into the CRMs and the PMSs out there. So, like, if I talk to you and my information is being captured by the community's PMS, CRM, everything, So you're in line for the reward. Should I move in? And then if I, as the prospect, have more questions and I wanted to get either a second opinion, or I forgot where your chat was, or whatever the question may be, or I go on the website and I'm like, oh, they look interesting, I'm going to send them a message. Rentgrata will allow it, but the resident reward portion would be split if I, as the prospect, moved in. So if they're offering a $50 reward, resident 1 would make $25, resident 2 would make $25. So we want to encourage reaching out and getting as many opinions as you need. With the text message integration and the response times that we've seen, most people are just choosing to message one resident because they're getting enough information quickly enough. However, we do have things in place, like if the resident is busy, like having a podcast, and they're not able to look at their phone, we have some automated things in there to encourage the prospect to reach out to a different resident, encourage the resident to respond, or else we'll remove them from the platform. But the kind of the fail safe is the lead is already in the system if it's coming through Neighbor Nurture, because the only way we capture that lead is from an initial source. And then if perhaps the website is they use the widget and we're the first touch, the lead is still being submit, even if a resident doesn't respond to the prospect. So either way, the resident is still going to assist and we'll be able to figure out the referral on the back end, but the lead is always being captured regardless of the resident.
Got it. That helps. Thanks. I would imagine one of your greatest moats, like with this company, is the resident ambassador, I'll say, database, meaning the more of those that you build up, the further ahead you get of potential competitors. But I could also see that being one of the greatest bottlenecks. So I'm curious to hear a little more about how you manage the churn, because just knowing the base, the simple fact that almost half of residents within 12 to 24 months for sure are going to churn from that property, that has to somehow trickle to you guys. So who's having to constantly be dealing with that churn, managing that resident database and trying to build it up and have it kind of scale in parallel with your own growth?
Yeah, I mean, through the integrations and through some like on-site team maintenance, there are some ways to just make sure that the resident list is accurate. But we do have kind of automated invites go out as we pick up new residents through the integration. One thing that's interesting, and I haven't brought this up in forever, but when we first created Rentgrata and the idea of where we want to go, but your question kind of brought it back up in my mind, is the idea that like you could create this really cool ILS network, essentially, where if you can imagine all of these communities have the Rentgrata chat with the resident, and you're just kind of like having them communicate with one another, and you're able to, I remember the slide, it was keep them in the family. Like you're able to keep a resident at an Olympus property at another Olympus. If they have to move, why not try and get them chatting with your residents at one of your communities, or kind of offer this web, and then the ability to kind of capitalize off of like, people are moving, and we do help improve resident retention, but like no technology. And I remember another vendor in the industry told me this years ago, and he was like, look, all these prop tech companies could come up, but in reality, like resident retention is still pretty much like where it was, right? And in reality, like, yes, it might have changed a little bit, and it might be community by community, but he's right. So the idea of like being able to create a better mousetrap for leasing and getting information from one person to another might be developed one day to say like, why wouldn't you have information on someone and you could get ahead of it with that information that you're getting and serve them up. And I think it would be an interesting way to create a competitive advantage on the ILS space, to kind of become like more of a hub. And then you're able to engage them during the lease with a retention technology where you're getting referrals, because like an ILS it's kind of single use, right? Like you use it to find a place and then you delete the app, you're done. And then they have to fight to get you again in like 2 years. Why? Like, why don't ILSs think of ways to like create more of a retention strategy for the renters and give them an opportunity to say like, you want to keep our app downloaded because what? And I think that that's an interesting way to think about kind of that resonant idea of how you can maneuver that.
Well, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here. I'm gonna test, Zach, your
Oh no.
I forget what word you used, but I'll use the word authenticity. Before we started, you said, "Hey, I'm going to be really open, and I don't have any problems." So, you talked about getting RX bars delivered to the condo, but do you have some other sort of fun misstep or like company building story that you're cool sharing with us?
I'll do two. They're pretty quick, I'd say. The first was the building that I lived at when I had the idea originally, and then went to Sam, and then he went to Ben. It was a management company that I thought would be like great to use Rentgrata as like our trial. So I emailed them. They were like, no. I tried to get like the community manager to sign up, and she was like, oh, this sounds great. And then marketing said no. I went around my pool deck and got residents to sign up. We had like 50 residents, and they're like, dude, like, no. And then I went to their management office because it was located in Chicago, and they were like, no. And so no kept happening. And it was like, oh, I look back, and we're actually working with this client now. And so sometimes you're glad that like people can have shorter term memories, and there could be some turnover, and there could be some ability to be like they were green and naive. But that was a good one. But the worst feeling I've ever had at Rentgrata it was right before Memorial Day. So it was like probably a Thursday of Memorial Day, like before. And we had just signed like our biggest deal. And this was back in probably 18, I think maybe 2019, probably 2018. And we were pumped. Like this was a game changer. And we thought, at least I thought, in our agreement that we had a line that said like we could publicly announce like the partnership on LinkedIn. So I did it. I mean, I was like, this is awesome. It's going to change like, rocket ship. Let's go. And so I'm in a meeting, and I have like a bunch of missed calls, and I'm like, oh man, like, all right, I got to get out of this meeting and see what's going on. And it was just like call me immediately. And so I called. We were not authorized. Had to delete. The whole partnership was in question. And so it's Memorial Day, like Thursday, right? So everyone's off basically Friday. We're off Monday. And I was going out of town, and it was just like, I think I just blew our biggest deal to date because of a LinkedIn post. And so I will never forget that moment. And I don't think my team will ever forget that either. And we were such a small team at that point. It was probably like 6 of us. I remember where like everything. It was like when you see like this tragic event happen, you're like, I remember where I was. I very much remember where I was. And so that was a very good lesson to learn, because we still ended up being able to work with them, and everything eventually was smoothed over, handwritten card, all, everything. But I'd say that probably stacks up as my biggest gaffe moment in Rentgrata history, because I don't know how much worse it could really get than that. But that pit in my stomach, I could really feel it like right now.
Reid, what's your gaff?
So many to pull from. I was trying to avoid speculating who that client was, because there's a few that quickly dropped into my brain. I feel like it was probably in the early stages, like before maybe we even officially had, I guess, I can't say founded, but like in those first few months. I don't know if you know, probably not, Zach, but we actually got sued in like 3 days after we founded from our former employer, even though we didn't have non-competes, non-solicits, which I point out over and over, like when the story comes up. They still went after us and tied us up for several months before we ended up kind of breaking through. But that was a very tough stretch. And I don't know if there was a single gaffe that I would point to, but just, and I look back and I don't know how we would have handled it that differently. But when I think about the lowest moment or the hardest time for us at Digible, it had to have been in those first few months.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know if I was going to keep my house, and didn't even know where I was going to work, because everybody in my network that was tied to media wasn't really opening any doors. So that was a scary time.
Yeah.
But the gaffe that you usually laugh about or bring up was when I took a shot at a certain PMS company.
I'm still gonna defend this one.
I actually just heard the first letter, so I think I know who you're mentioning there.
Well, we had just gotten back from AIM, I think, our first experience with AIM, and I wrote a blog about kind of the freshman experience at AIM for David and I. And I took a little jab at one of those companies, and somehow they discovered it in the blog and actually sent us a little nasty note saying that
Wow.
you better take that down if you have any intention of working with us. I was like, how did you even know?
Well, it was up for like 2 or 3 years before they found it.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. It was when we went to go sign the partnership that they were like, reverse the record player.
They must be crawling.
It was
like websites. Yeah. So maybe that's the easy, goofy, funny gaffe that I can point to. What about you? You're not exempt here. What would you say is your
on the
biggest gaffe?
I can't.
Besides mispronouncing 80% of the people that we have on this podcast.
Yeah, that's why I just don't pronounce.
Name,
yeah. So you just invite simple names now. It's like, Zach.
You're
I could
lucky,
deal with Zach.
Yeah. I thought my question had been like any fun company building. So what came to mind first before our gaffe was Reid and I had just flown back from some trip. I don't know what conference we were doing, and Nicole, our third founder, and my wife, she hates being late. So she's like, you know what? I'm going to Uber from the airport back to the office. And Reid and I are like, we're going to get lunch because we don't like to go hungry. And so we stopped to get lunch somewhere, and we were slow. And so next thing you know, I had a Fiona demo. So like trying to sell our technology to somebody. And so Reid's driving me in his Acura, back to the office, and he is minding the speed limit, but I'm hot spotted in on my laptop and dialed in, like doing this demo for somebody. And at the same time, the Fiona's crashing. So I'm also texting our head of engineering saying, hey, fix this bug. I don't know why this just happened. And right as that happens, Reid gets pulled over. So I'm in the passenger seat. A cop comes up to the window and is like, license and registration. And I'm muting and unmuting our Join Me. We were on Join Me at the time, not even on Zoom. And it's not the easiest there's no hotkey to unmute, because like client would ask me a question, but the officer's like, I could, Reid can tell this part of the story, but the officer's like, I could take you to jail right now. And I'm like, quickly, let's please mute this so the client doesn't hear. But
yeah, my plates were expired, and he was pretty friendly when I first rolled down the window. And then at some point he said, okay, I'm going to turn my body cam off now. And I was like, why did he just say that? Yeah. And then his tone changed dramatically, and he threatened to impound my car and haul us off. And I was like, what the, I almost said, what the F, but it was pretty disturbing. Yeah. Meanwhile, David is like trying to close the business. I think we ended up actually getting a truck.
All I remember is that they ended up verbally on the phone saying, yeah, we'll give you 10 properties. Yeah. And I was like, this is the most unbelievable sales process.
Yeah, it was pretty epic.
Don't remember what client it was now, but I do remember sitting there in the hot weather, and you're pulled over, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get back to the office.
Yeah, unforgettable. Well, getting us back on track, I mentioned or asked you about the biggest objections. I don't know if I can connect this, but like, what do you see as the biggest obstacles for Rentgrata, but also opportunities? So think 3 years out, Zach, what do you see as y'all's biggest opportunity as a company, and also your biggest challenge?
So I think opportunity wise, really speaking to like where these residents can do more by proving out what Neighbor Nurture's done. The idea that, and I won't name specific companies that we're talking about partnering with, but if you're able to do unique things with your unit, is there an opportunity to help market that from the community's perspective, but also this other company that is able to offer this unique experience and help you maybe make and monetize apartment living off of a flexible schedule. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to say, and to one of the points earlier, like listings on an ILS, the way that people are searching for apartments is still kind of living 10, 15 years ago. Material changes have been a little slower, and integrating different bots and technologies is good. And it's definitely a step in the right direction, but waiting for someone to completely overhaul the whole concept of really how you're searching for an apartment and how you get connected in the right way. So I think opportunity wise, really, since we're the first ones doing what Rentgrata is doing, that we're still just scratching the surface of the idea of like, where can residents be inserted into the leasing process, and how can they assist and make things smoother and more efficient. So there's an opportunity there. And I think we have some really, really sharp clients that see where we're at now, and they like want us to get there. And there's just so many different opportunities to leverage a resident. And look, like a community, whatever your ratio is for how many people are working at the community, you're always going to have a bigger number on the resident side than the staff. And you have all of these residents that are just either working from home, or some of them, there's guaranteed to be someone that's in their unit at that time that's willing to help for some side hustle money. So is there a way to leverage that? And I think that there's just a lot of opportunity there. When it comes to challenges, I think like, and as everyone on like the venture side and everything is just, I liken it to kind of getting on a treadmill. And every month, like you're going up 0.1. And like, it's cool. Like when you're going from, like $1,000 to $2,000 in revenue, or like 25 to 30,000 a month in revenue. But like your goals, the percentage increase gets higher as you gain more. And then that expectation doesn't stop. So I think that that's an interesting one. It's just like trying to, and luckily, like we were, now I'm in Tampa, but we were a Midwest based company, and like we raised within our means, right? So we haven't had this like runaway valuation and had to have like down rounds and everything, and we've always been very low when it comes to capitalization. So we've been very efficient, but it still doesn't change expectations for the most part. So I think a challenge is just, as every salesperson probably is feeling in this market too, is just like, how do you, navigate budgets and continue to navigate them, and really prove out the value proposition continuously? Because like it or not, I mean, we're somewhat competing against AI, because we're not, right? When you think about like what Rentgrata is in the last hour that we've been communicating with each other, like it's not AI, but some people are like, who's nurturing my lead? But I think we just need to understand, like, if you're replacing a full leasing consultant, that salary, you could implement 5 technologies a year for still a fraction of that salary, and really maybe do more things efficiently. So I think a challenge is just, continuing to work your way into budgets, and find that niche, because it's different for each owner and management company out there too.
Totally. Super fast follow-up, but would you welcome competition at this point versus be glad that it doesn't exist? Because if one of those larger tech companies were to come to market with a competitor, that creates a lot more noise, expectation. There's the whole thing of like, is it actually best to be first to market? So yeah, would you think that would help your challenge of growth if you had a couple of others enter into the space?
I'm figuring out how to answer this question. But yes, I'd be interested in a competitor. Yes, I've had clients tell me that there is a potentially very large competitor entering the space. Yes, I'm pumped about it, because we're going to kick their butt. And we know what we're doing very well. We've been doing it. This is what we are created to do. This is like what our mission is to do this really well. And this company's mission is to do that very well. And so it is certainly something that I'm excited about, but it is tough because like I want to go on LinkedIn and be like, this person's, because it is something that's good because it proves that what we've been working on has validation. And I do want other companies out there to see like this is actually something that's coming to market. And so, and it's not something, I don't want to give them press, but like at conferences and stuff, they've teased it, and it's something that like is being talked about amongst their clients. But I definitely welcome it, especially for the clients that they have that are using us or not using us and are considering them or us, whatever it is just like finally get to say, put our technology up against theirs when it does roll out and see what's better. So yeah, Reid, like I think we're at a very good spot to have that conversation. A couple of years ago, I think it would have probably had me a little bit more nervous because we were just getting there with some clients and still not on that, the precipice of like even more. And I look at kind of right over there, one of these books of just like crossing the chasm of like, you need to get from certain types of clients to other types. And it takes time and it's not always a very linear sales process. And so we've become closer and closer to be getting that like mainstream kind of laggard client. And it's hard to get them, right? And I don't think we'll ever get some laggards. Like they'll say, if it's not in this stack, I'm not using it. So it will help to have them be able to say like, oh, well, they are offering it. Like, let's maybe look at what the best in class is instead of just using their technology. So I'm glad you asked that question because it is something that for the first time in my life, I'll be able to sell a technology that has a direct competitor that we can say like, here's what we do, here's what they do, choose for yourself instead of like, here's what we do, you should like it, it works.
Totally. And before I let David maybe close this up, I didn't let you agree or disagree that your database is one of your biggest components of your moat. So I would think that that's one of the things with a head start of a few years that you'd have an advantage on, which is we've already, built up, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of these ambassadors. That being said, when you have, deep pockets and all sorts of technology already adopted across the states, they could probably shortcut that pretty quickly. So if I'm wrong and you're like, that's not really actually our greatest moat, what would you say is your greatest moat at Rentgrata?
It's a good question. Honestly, I can't answer it with 100% certainty on either side. I think that it is a good moat that we have, but in reality, like if someone was very well capitalized and just said, hey, we'll pay you $50 just to sign up for our platform, then the resident will probably, like, you could drive for Lyft and Uber. So like if someone wanted to, they could probably onboard residents of ours. So I don't know that I'd say that we have like a huge moat there. I'd say that the moat, one of the most valuable resources we have is just data of the conversations, all the data behind these prospect and resident conversations. And that's a route that we're kind of really going into, is more conversation insights of what are people looking for? Why do they like living there? And we can help understand and analyze that to help them build better communities and develop them, manage them better. When you take over ownership, how can you kind of shake things up from where they previously were and get your touch on them? So I think that that's a bigger head start out there than just the resident base. I mean, yeah, we have hundreds of thousands of residents signed up and using Rentgrata, but like, I don't want to sit here and sound too naive in the sense that, yes, someone could get 100 million in funding and just be like, okay, well, Rentgrata has had a fraction of this funding and we can go out there and do it differently. We certainly have very loyal customers and a head start, but I don't know that I would go out there and boast that on our behalf.
Well, appreciate the candor there. Final little, I guess, salvo over at you. You had mentioned bold prediction earlier, and we usually get either a bold prediction or a hot take. So hot take being something controversial, bold prediction meaning that you think is true today, bold prediction being in the future. So take your pick. You want to give us a bold prediction or a hot take?
I'll do two because I do want to rehash the first one. Is just I have this feeling where it was funny because I won't say who, I remember who wrote it, but they had a bold prediction for 2023 that like AI was going to fizzle out. And, you know,
Yeah, that
it's
was Reid.
cool.
No.
I stand by that. No,
No, it wasn't.
That was not me.
It wasn't Reid. That wasn't who I was referring to. But like clearly that's wrong, right? And it's okay. That's bold predictions. They're not meant to be 100% accurate. But I do feel like it's going to become, there's going to be a tipping point where it's going to become a commodity. And you don't care for the most part where you stop and get gas because it's the same dang thing. Like if you want 87, 93, 89, whatever, go to Exxon, go to Shell, doesn't matter to you. But is that good? Like for your apartment community to get the brand out there that they work so like hard to curate and the great website? Like, is it good that you're blending in with everyone else? Like, no, I don't think so. So I think it's going to be a rude awakening potentially when people start to realize that they've started to over um, over technology themselves, whatever, and got out of like their differentiating brand. So that's one. I already said that one though, so I'll go a little bit bolder. I'm curious where Google goes with reviews overall, just in the sense that like reviews are so gamified, and they don't really necessarily tell the real story. And I think Google will develop something better than just a 1 through 5 star with some different, you know, criteria behind the paragraphs that you're writing there. Um, because to me, like just a very basic one, but a 4.6 Chipotle doesn't equal a 4.6 $4 amazing Michelin star dinner reservation. Like it's the same, it's 4.6, but subjectively very different, objectively, you know, who knows, right? You need to have other knowledge to understand it. So curious to see if they start testing, like, you know, Instagram got rid of showing how many likes you have, like get rid of reviews and start using the data that they might have about communities to help market it better and to create more of a Google advantage. And so I'd love to see that one personally, but as I read reviews and just constantly go into this flux of what the heck is actually the truth here, Google doesn't want you to question the data you're reading. And I don't think that they would. I'm not working at Google, but why aren't reviews able to be easier to decipher? And so I do think that that's something that might change. And if it does change, then we're kind of all left to figure out and pick up the pieces there.
So yeah, solid. I just was thinking about how when you said reviews in the 4.6 at Chipotle, it reminded me when I was in New York, everywhere I would go, I had this little like moleskin book where I would personally rate the diet soda, the Diet Coke at the establishment I was at. And Anthony from the Brinson Group would argue with me on this, but in New York City, I thought Chipotle had the best Diet Coke of anyone around. Anthony thinks it's McDonald's, but
I have to ask, what's the criteria? The amount of syrup or carbonation, or
it's just like the overall freshness of feeling your thirst quenched. I will say though, the Dirty Duck, the bar over here in Colorado, in Denver, not a good rating. That's more like the 1.6.
Well, yeah, I think their focus is a little more on alcohol.
Oh,
than it is on,
you don't think the Dirty Duck was
Diet
focused
Coke.
on their Diet Coke? Yeah, they need to clean that gun.
Yeah, prove that they work.
Yeah. All right. Well, Zach, thank you so much for being here with us today. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about Rentgrata, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, rentgrata.com, my LinkedIn, just Zach Sloan or Zachary. I don't even know these days. Zach at rentgrata.com is my email with the CH. But no, I really appreciate David and Reid. Like, this was amazing. Great chatting with you both. And for anyone out there listening, appreciate that as well.
Cool. Well, thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.